Let's paint some pumpkin pie. Thanks for being here. If you don't already, follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Please do. Made by Kate. That's where I post all of my updates, new paint designs, tutorials, that sort of thing. Now, before we begin, let's go over the materials just to make sure you have everything you need. We've got a pencil. I've got an arrangement of brushes today. We've got a really extra big one. Now, if you don't have one that is around this size, that's okay. When we get to this point, I'll tell you exactly what you can do instead of using a big brush. We've got 5 colors we're working with: black, brown, orange, yellow, and white. And just make sure that you have a water cup, a plate or something for your palette, and a paper towel for drying your brushes off. Now, as a reminder, I do work pretty quickly, so you are welcome to pause this video at any time that you need to. Let's get started. First thing we're going to do is sketch our design. So using your pencil, let's first make a light dotted line down the middle of our canvas. This is a vertical line, and one down the middle this way, horizontally. This kind of just shows us where our centers are of our canvas, okay? Now, after that, we are going to go up about 3 or 4 fingers on this left side, and we're gonna make a dot. And then we're going to go up about 2 fingers on this right bottom side, and we're gonna also make a little mark, okay? That's where our plate is going to swoop down and attach to. Let's do these top ones as well. I would say about 5 fingers from the top. We'll make a little mark. And about 6 fingers, or maybe even just a thumb width from that middle line there. First thing we're going to do is create our circular plate shape. Now, it's not a perfect circle, it is an oval. You can rotate your canvas if you need to get a nice swoop. Go ahead and sketch the best that you can in a rounded motion. We want to leave a little space here at the bottom. We don't want to go all the way to the bottom of the canvas. And if this is not perfect, it's okay. All right, this is really just a rough sketch. Don't worry about erasing. We're gonna do 2 lines here, and it should just be a nice little swoop. A lot of times people like to erase and worry about their lines being perfect, but there's really no need to because we're painting over the top of it. So really, you can be as messy with your sketches as you want to. Once you're done with that swoop, we're gonna do the same thing at our top swoop. We're gonna go from this point over here to this point over here. And it's not too much of an arc, it's just a very slight curve. Now I'm sketching a little bit darker just so you guys can see my lines. Try to sketch lightly on yours just because it's easier to cover up. And then we are doing the same thing on this arc as well. We're going to do a second line here. So there's our flattened oval circle type shape. Remember, you can pause this video anytime you need to get caught up. All right, our next shape is going to be a triangle shape. So it's going to be right about center. This is where our crosses are marking, right in the center, right there. We can make a little dot so we know where that center is at. And our lines are going to go right across here. And this is the initial shape we're going to do. So I'm just going to do it myself. Do your best to follow. We want to just make sure that there are about 3 fingers from this point over to the side, and about 2 fingers where our pie is going to end. And we need these lines to be pretty straight and crisp, leaving 2 fingers from this side. Sketching can be one of the most difficult parts of this, so take your time, try your best. So now we have a triangle shape with our bottom line being the longest, making sure we have 2 fingers on this side and about 3 fingers on this side. Take your time. Now we're going to create the body of the pie. So we're going to just pull this line down. It's on a slight angle. It's just a little bit, it's not perfectly straight with this side of the canvas. It's a little bit turned inwards. And this line and this line are going to be about the same length. And then we're just going to attach the 2. And this longer line here should be pretty parallel to this line here. And to draw the crust, it's just another little parallel line, like the width of a pencil. So it's not very thick. That's our crust. It's gonna go up the back side of this piece of pie as well. And then we have a curvy crust here. This is kind of fun. Go ahead and make this your own painting, however you want. Be creative, make it your own. Fix your lines if you need to, take your time. I'm just straightening mine out because they are a little bit curved. All right, and then the dollop of whipped cream. This is also a triangular shape, kind of looks similar to an emoji, if you know what I'm talking about. And really, you can do whatever shape of dollop of whipped cream that you want to, but this is just how I like to draw mine. With a little curl at the top there. And I am gonna draw in a line right here and a line right here. And you'll see why that'll be a guide for us later. So take your time getting sketched to this point. Pause it if you need to. I'm gonna move right along. Once we have our thing sketched out, let's see. We're gonna use our small brush and black. And this is what I like to call underpainting. So we're just going to use just a drop of black. We don't need very much of it, not even a dime size, just a drop. And using your black brush, or your small brush, you're gonna dip, wipe it off so you don't have very much on there. And at this point, we're literally just sketching these lines, but with our black brush, with our black paint. Now, like I said, this is an underpainting. So it's okay if the lines are not perfect. This is just a guide. Just a guide to show us where our paint's gonna go. If your lines are wonky, if they're wiggly, if they're thick, if they're thin, that's totally fine. They do not need to be perfect. It's just a guide to where our paint's gonna go. I like to work top to bottom, left to right. That just helps me avoid my hand smearing the paint. Okay, remember these lines don't need to be perfect. And I mean, I'm going to repeat myself many times because really it's just something that we need to practice, is that imperfections are actually okay. All right, now I'm just moving on to the crust. Your crust can be as curvy as you'd like or as smooth as you'd like. It's really up to you. No right or wrong way. Think of it like a coloring book. We're just creating the lines for the coloring book right now. Careful where you're putting your hand so that you don't smear anything. If you need to rotate your canvas, then you sure can. All right, we all know what this looks like, okay? But it'll look like whipped cream when we're done, I promise. I'm gonna rotate my canvas here just so I can get a better solid controlled line. Remember, it's okay if your lines are wonky, it's okay if they're wiggly, it's okay if some are thick and some are thin. Totally fine, it's just a guide. If you are having really thick lines and you're wondering how to do thinner lines, you can dip into your black paint and then you can wipe it off on your plate. That'll get your brush to be a little bit of a thinner stroke and it won't have as thick of paint on it. But really, it doesn't matter right now. We're just getting the lines on there. It's just a nice little part of the painting that adds a nice guide for us to add our color. I really love this painting. This one's really fun to do. And other people who have painted it have really enjoyed it as well. Careful where you're putting your hand. And you can easily see here that my lines are not perfect, and that's totally fine. Also, careful where you're putting your hand. I touched my line and I got some black on my finger, so it happens and it's okay, just leave it alone. We'll let it dry and then we can fix it when we get to that point. Okay, there's my black. I'm gonna wash my brush out. Dry it off. All right, our next step is going to be our background base color. Now we're going to mix this one up. Our base color is actually not plain white, it is a tan color. So we're going to start with about a quarter size, maybe a little bit more of white. And we're also going to add a drop of brown. Now we're not adding it to it, we're just adding it next to it, okay? So you should be able to see, yep, I've got my brown and my white. Now I'm going to use, usually this is my big brush. I'm gonna call this my medium-sized brush, though it's about the size of my finger. And we're going to just scoop a little bit of that brown, not very much. Brown and black are very deep colors. Deep, rich colors, they go a long ways. A little bit goes a long ways. So you don't need very much, you just need a little dip of it. All right, we're mixing it into our white. This is going to create a nice tan color for our background. You can see how it's looking if you want to paint it on there. I'm gonna go a little bit darker, so I'm just gonna pull in a little bit more brown. Okay. This is really up to you. If you want a darker color, add more brown or black to it. This is just a nice solid tan color. I'm gonna just go with that. And we're going to just fill in all of this space here, working from the top down, filling in the space, solid, okay? So solid tan. Now, when we get close to those black lines, we're going to get up nice and as close as we possibly can to them. And you're gonna go slow and steady to get a nice crisp line. Obviously, I did not get a crisp line there. I'm gonna slow down a little bit and get it a little bit nicer and crisp. But really, none of this black is gonna show anyways by the time we're done because it's just a guide. But it helps to have nice crisp lines. So you can slow down there, you can get a nice curved, crisp line. If you happen to paint over your black line, that's totally fine. You can see I did right here. Not a big deal, those black lines, think of it as a guide where you're putting the paint. However, we wanna make sure that those black lines are dry, because if you happen to touch the black line with this cream and it's not all the way dry yet, it's going to just smear into a big gray blob. We're gonna fill in this bottom space as well. Okay. All right, so there's our background. Pretty simple. Wash your brush off when you're done. And now our next step is going to be the plate. Dry the brush off so it's all the way dry. All right, now we need plain white. So I would just do a nice quarter size of white. And this is kind of fun and simple. We're really just painting white on white. It feels kind of silly, but like I had said before, if you cover up the black lines, just make sure that those black lines are all the way dry. Otherwise, it's going to be a big smudgy smear. Now we're filling in the space of the plate. We're going to get up nice and close to the pie. Nice, close and steady. And then when we get to the edges, watch this. We're literally painting right over the top of that black. Now you should still be able to see those lines underneath your white. And that's the whole goal. We want to see those lines because it's our guide. We're going to be painting in this circular motion, following the curve of the plate, because that's what's going to give us our texture and our shadowing that we're going to create here in just a minute. So you can see I'm going nice and slow right here on this outside edge. I want all of that black to be covered up. Well, why did we paint the black anyways, Kate? Feels like such a waste. Not a waste at all. It's actually going to help guide us. So just trust me here, because this is just part of the process. And it'll make it all come together. Same thing up top, get nice and close to those lines, those crust lines. Okay, I've got all my black covered up. And once you're done with that step and you have paint all the way up to the pie, the body of the pie, I'm going to show you how to do some of the shadowing. It's going to show us the texture of the plate. Okay, remember what I said, this swoop here, the swoop of the plate itself, those black lines you can still see underneath our white. That's perfect. We want to see those lines because it's going to help us shape this plate. Okay, nice. So using the colors we already have on our plate, we're going to utilize those. I didn't wash my brush. I'm not going to. We're going to dip into our black. Now be careful because black goes a really long ways. So here's my brush that's still white. I'm just going to barely dab into my black, and I'm going to pull this over to about right here, okay? We're going to start a new little puddle, and I'm just going to start pulling some of my white over into it. And we're going to create a nice gray color. Now this could be tricky. We don't want this gray to be too dark, but watch what I'm doing here. I'm following that inner line that we've already painted with this gray color. It's all about that curve that we've painted. That's what'll help us get that look that we're going for. Now, that feels really, really harsh, but hear me out here. We're gonna do a line right here as well. Now, we are going to just wipe that off and dip right back into our plain white. And we're just gonna go over the top of it in that swirly motion in the curve of the plate. You can just paint right over the top of it and it'll just blend it right together, giving us a nice textured, rounded look with some dimension for our plate. This could take some practice, but don't be afraid of the bold, okay? If you put the gray on and it's really, really bold for you, it's an easy fix. Just wipe your brush off, dip back into your white and paint over the top of it, and it will blend right together. This is something we want to do in one step fully because while it's wet, it helps to blend. So it's all about painting in the curve of that plate. And we can come back and add really bright white highlights after it's dry. Because right now it's just in a nice space to blend. And so if we want it to really pop, we're gonna have to wait for a minute. Okay, I just dipped into my gray again. I'm gonna do just one more little line right there. Our goal is that we don't want any black to show, so it's okay to paint over the top of it. Whether you paint it with gray or with white, I'll show you how we're going to add that bright highlight. It's pretty much done. I'm liking the look of this, but I think that it'll look complete with a bright white touch. It's really all about that curved brush stroke. White's your best friend. It will help you blend everything together. And less is always more. So less paint on your brush is going to be helpful as well. And I'm touching my canvas very lightly. It's almost like a feather. Another thing I like to do is hold my picture out. When I hold it out, I can see better where it might need another shadow or where it could use another highlight. You can always hand it to your neighbor or your friend so you can get a different perspective or a different view of it. I'm just dipping right into my plain white right now, and I'm just doing this outside edge to really make it pop, which is plain white. Okay, I like it. So your details can be as harsh, like your gray lines can be as harsh or as subtle as you would like them to be. But I will tell you this much, there is a time when you have to literally be done, because otherwise you can keep tinkering for forever on this step. Okay, I'm gonna do one more little line of white, and then I think I'm going to be done with this step. I'm just softly brushing over the top of this harsh line right there just to lighten it up a bit. I dipped back into my white. Dipping in my white again, going to do a little highlight down here just to make that a little brighter. Make sure no black is showing. Remember, hold it out so you can see it from a different perspective. That's always helpful. Okay, I think that looks pretty good for right now, so I think we're gonna move on. All right. I'm actually gonna make this a little bit of a thinner gray line, just by dipping into my white and softly brushing over the top of it. Okay. All right, like I said, you could keep tinkering forever, so I need to stop and take my own advice. All right. Okay, so when you're done with this and you feel pretty good about it, now we're going to mix up our color for our crust. We already have brown on our plate. We already have white. If you don't have white, add a little bit more, or we can use this tan color that we have. And this is where the yellow comes in. So we are going to scoop a little bit of our cream off to the side. We're gonna add just a little bit more brown to it. And we're going to add a drop of yellow off to this side. You don't even need that much, you just need a tiny bit. Take a corner of it, mix it in. This is just gonna warm up our crust color. Now, if it's looking too yellow, we need to add a little bit more brown to it. But the yellow just makes it nice and warm. And if you need to lighten it up, add more white or add more cream. And I feel good about this tone. Don't add too much yellow because it doesn't really need that much yellow. And then you can use your small brush or you can use your big brush, whichever one feels more comfortable to you. And we're just going to simply fill in the space of the crust. Okay, as we're filling in the crust, go ahead and cover up those black lines. Remember, those black lines are just a guide to show us where we're putting our paint. If you need to swap out to your small brush, then you can. That's fine. If you need to rotate your canvas so that you can get a little bit more control, then please do. Remember, we're covering up all those black lines. We don't want any black to show. Remember, it's totally okay to cover up those black lines. That's what we want to do. I've covered up some of this from the dollop, but it's okay. It's just a guide to show us where we're putting our paint, so it's not gonna hurt a thing. Okay, I like it. All right. Now we're gonna mix up our pumpkin pie color. We're just gonna get these colors on here and then I will show you how to add the highlights. Shake up your orange. We're going to add a, let's see. Let's do a nickel size of orange for right now. Actually, let's do a quarter size. We'll do a quarter size. I haven't even washed my brush. I think that this will be just fine. So what we're gonna do first, this is a really bright orange, so we're going to make it a little darker, scooping up a little bit of brown and gonna mix the brown in it. Brown goes a really long way. Remember to start small with little bits of brown. Gonna mix it up and get a nice, deeper, richer color of orange. It's gonna look kind of like a brown color, but honestly, this is what we're going for. A deeper, dirtier colored orange. Okay, so you can actually put a stroke on there and you can see how it looks. That's still pretty orange to me, so I'm going to pull in a little bit more brown. And it's gonna feel weird. You're gonna think, what in the world is this color? It's gross looking, but just trust me here. It's supposed to be pumpkin pie, so we need it a little bit darker. A deep burnt orange color. This is perfect. Okay, so we're doing this deeper, darker orange color on this top part of our pie. So you can go in, get close to that dollop, cover up some of those black lines. Make sure your lines are looking nice and crisp and straight. Now this color will likely be pretty transparent. That means you can see your strokes really well and you can see the black underneath it. Not a problem. That just means we'll have to do a couple different layers and we have to let them dry in between the layers, okay? So we're gonna just do this first layer first. Let it dry. Come back to it and add another layer. Really what we want to do is just make sure that our finished lines, the ones that we're actually painting with the color, are nice and crisp. And to get those, we just go nice and slow. Whether we follow the black line or if it goes out of it or if it's a little bit off, it's okay. I do want my end though to be pretty crisp, so I'm gonna make sure that that is looking nice and crisp. And it might need, we'll get there, but you can see my point is not very crisp. I want it more of a crisp line. I'll show you how to get that in a minute. So I'm just gonna do, I'm just making sure that I've got my first layer of this pumpkin pie orange looking pretty good. Okay, so while that dries, we're going to mix up another color for this second piece. Save this color here because we're gonna use this again to make that second layer, but let's just pull a little bit over to the side and let's grab some tan color. Tan from our background, okay? And we're just gonna mix that up to a lighter tone. So we have a lighter tone for this side of the pie. We're just gonna fill it in, once again, covering up the black lines. And when you get close to the edges, just make sure they're nice, clean, and crisp by going slow and steady. If you feel more comfortable with a different brush, go ahead and use whatever brush you feel more comfortable with. And careful as you're touching this wet layer of darker orange because it will blend and smear together. So you can just make sure you're going nice and slow, getting all of that filled in. Now we don't want this step to look too peachy. So if it's looking peachy, then you can add a little bit more of your deep orange tone to it because we do not want it to look peachy. We still want it to be a pretty deep color, just not as deep as our top part. And we want them different enough that they obviously contrast, but we don't want them too different either. I'm just being really careful as I get close to this darker orange tone, just so that I don't smear the two together, because I really do want a nice line between the two, but we obviously don't want any white to show, and we don't want any black to show either. So take your time, and let's make those lines nice and crisp. Oh, so if you happen to do a little hoonie like I just did, man, you can either let it dry, or you can try to thicken it out a bit, so that thicken your orange out so that you don't have to fix the tan part. So watch this. You can just make this a little thicker, just like that. Nice. Now I can still see my black lines through there. That's totally fine. We're gonna let it dry. We can put on we can do another layer. And then here is where I'm trying to touch up my point. Right here, where the top point and the side point are touching. I really want a crisp line there. So I'm just gonna keep working on making sure this line is pretty parallel to the crust line. And then I can go back with my deeper orange color and really straighten that out so that it is a nicer point. Okay, now let's go back to our top part of the pie. I'm just gonna dip right back into my deeper orange tone. We're just gonna start filling it in again. You gotta make sure that this part is dry, otherwise it's not gonna cover it up completely. There's not really much highlighting on the part of the pie, really. It's just mainly making sure that it is getting covered so that there's not, it's not transparent, okay? So you might need to do a couple coats of it. It's fine if you do. Just make sure it's dry in between so that you're really getting that layer to stick. If it's not, it's gonna just pull the paint right back up. So you can kind of see I pulled a little bit of it up right here. So I'm just gonna dab it on. Hope that it dries. And with my point here, it's getting pretty well, but I actually think I'll touch it up with white at the end so that I have a nice crisp line. It's not as crisp as I would like it to be, but it could be a little crisper. Now I'm gonna go back to this side part again. I just kind of dabbed off my brush a little bit. I'm not washing it yet because I want the colors to be on there. Like I want to have a little bit of texture to the side, So I still have my darker orange in my brush, and I'm just pulling it in that same direction, this diagonal direction, just to give it a little bit of texture. That's the key here, is to paint in that direction. And I just want to make sure that that black is getting covered up. Once again, it's not going to cover up unless it's all the way dry. So just be wary of that. And you can always go back and add another stroke if you need to. Let it dry for a minute. All right, now let's add some highlights to our crust. I'm just gonna dab my brush off. I'm not even gonna wash it. I'm gonna go back to my crust color. I'm gonna pull some lighter into it. And this is gonna be our lighter tone, okay? So watch closely. I'm literally just going to do some brush strokes over the top of these little lumps here. And then I want to add a little bit of a darker tone as well. So I'm just going to dab my brush off, dip into my brown, pull some brown over to this side. Remember, brown goes a really long way, so we really don't want it to be too dark, but we need it dark enough to show a little bit of contrast. And I'm going to dab my brush off so I don't have very much on it. And I'm just going to brush in between where I just did the highlights, just to add a little bit of contrast. I'm going to do some brush strokes down the side here as well, and on the bottom too. It just kind of roughs it up a bit. Adds to the painting, I think, to the texture. Now, if you do a stroke that you don't like, it's an easy fix. Let me show you how. I'm just dabbing my brush back off. I'm gonna dip back into our original color. And less is always more on your paintbrush, and I'm just softly gonna go over the top of that, and that's just going to help blend it together. So the key to the highlights on the crust is really just getting those nice lumps, white little highlight, white or light background highlight, just right down the top. You can even do bright white if you want to as well. Bright white will be very bright, but it will really make it pop. And you can always go back to it and touch it up as well as we go. Dipping back into my crust color will help blend the colors if you don't want them to be too bright. But I really like how that looks. Okay. Now to the white, our whipped cream. I'm adding just a little bit more white to my plate, and I'm simply just gonna start filling in that dollop. We don't want the black to show. And careful with your orange. If it's still wet, just be really, really careful about it. Okay. And now I'm going to go back in and try and get that little curl right there at the top. Nice. Remember, no black to show. Now you can see my color is starting to, I'm pulling the color and it's blending. So we're going to leave it be. We're going to let it dry for a minute. And to add some shading to this, I just dipped into my crust color. And remember where those lines are at? I'm just gonna do a couple of those lines. And we can always go back and touch this up. Not sure why there's orange pulling through right there. So we'll let it dry for a little bit. We'll go back over it with plain white, and the white will really just clear it up, pull it together. I just want to make sure our edges are nice and crisp. The shading is just that brownish tone that you should already have on your plate. And I like to just kind of do this little edge here and that swoop there. But you can see I'm pulling the paint off, so I need to just let it go, and I can go back over it in a minute when it's dry. So we'll do that. Okay, now let's talk about the background. As we let this dry, we'll come back to it and we'll just make sure we've got a nice shade happening. Background is our gingham, okay, or buffalo check. So this is where you have the option. You can either do a small gingham or you can do a big gingham, and it depends on which brush. So I've done one with this size and I've done one with this size. This is the one that it'll look like if it has a big brush. Otherwise, if you use this size of brush, about the width of your finger, your gingham will be a lot smaller. But the concept is the same. I'm going to use my big brush, and I'm going to show you how to create this. Okay, so we need to mix up a little bit of a darker brown color so that we have some contrast. Now, we should already have these colors on our plate. So we have brown, we have some of our background color. I'm going to simply just swoop up some of that brown, and I'm just gonna dab it right into my white. This will feel a lot just like what we did for our main background color, but we want this to be a little bit darker than our main color was. Not too much darker, but enough that you can tell it's a different shade. So if you need to add more brown, that's totally fine. So this is how we do it. Whether you're using a small brush or your big brush, we're going to start from the top left corner, and you're just going to pull a straight line down. So you can see my paint is different than my background color. That's perfect. And we're just gonna go nice and slow. And we're just gonna get some vertical lines down here. Now we're gonna go close to the plate. We're gonna touch up the plate lines at the end. Now using the thickness, the width of your brush, that's how you're going to determine where your next line is gonna be. So I want them to be about the same thickness and width of the brush. And you're just going to do the same thing, doing vertical lines, pulling them down. Go nice and slow, rotate your canvas if you need to so you have more control. And this is just a fun way to paint gingham. Now, if your lines get thin, like mine did, that's actually okay. I kind of like the look of that. I'm not gonna touch it up, but if you feel like you need to, you can. So using my width of my brush, just gonna jump a line. And I'm careful so that my hand is not rubbing or smearing my pie painting. I'm just gonna pull this down to my plate. We want these lines to be all the same width, so that's why we just try to do one stroke, one brush stroke, one width thick. Okay, jumping it again, pulling it down. Like I said, you can rotate your brush or your canvas if you need to. And remember, imperfections are what make this painting really cute. I don't like it to be perfect. If it were, it would be too stressful to try and get those perfect lines. So I'm gonna do one more little guy down here on this edge because I think that it would be there. Okay, filling that one in. All right, now I'm just gonna fill this in a little bit too. Now we're gonna do the same thing. We just gotta make sure we have those same lines down here at the bottom. The same width, same thickness. Getting up close to your plate, we can touch the plate up at the end. The width of the brush. So if you're using a small brush, your gingham will be much smaller, but still the concept is the same. Okay, now we're gonna do the same thing, but horizontal lines. If you need more paint, mix up a little bit more. I need a little bit more, so I'm just gonna add a little bit of white. Grab a little bit more brown. Mix up that tan color again. And now we're gonna do horizontal lines, starting from the top, pulling it over. Go nice and slow so you can get a steady line. Using just the thickness of your brush so that everything stays the same width. And then using your brush as a guide to show you where your next line is gonna be. It's okay if you paint on your plate, you can touch that up at the end. Okay, and then down here, it doesn't really matter where, just as long as you kind of get a line that goes through it. All right, now this is the key to making it look like the gingham. Grab some more brown. We're gonna mix just one more tone, and this is gonna be the darkest tone of them all, but we still want it to be light, just not too dark, but dark enough that it's different than what we just used. Using that same brush, we're literally just going to go over. If you need it darker, you can add a little bit more brown to it. This is the trickiest part, but it's really, really fun. It makes it all work. So this is how we make the gingham. I'm just doing a brush stroke in the shape of the width of my brush. And this is going to go over the top of where every vertical and horizontal line crosses. So that's what I mean by tricky. Some people end up putting this darker square on the wrong place, but it's going to go where the horizontal, the vertical and the horizontal cross, the crosshair right there where they're touching. And that's how you create your buffalo check. And I'm just doing one single stroke just to make sure that it looks like it. You can also go back the other way just to kind of touch up your lines so that they're a little bit more square. But really, it's okay if this is not a perfect brush stroke. I like the imperfection of it. Okay, so now I'm gonna wash that brush out. I'm gonna go back and touch up my outside lines of my plate, touch up my, well, while I'm looking at it, I can see this little black line, so I'm gonna add some of the pie colors right there just to cover that up. Touch up my top part of my pie so that it gets nice and covered. This is where you can touch up any of your lines if you need to. Just make sure that all that black is covered. If it's not covering, let it dry, do another layer. There's really not a highlight on the top of our pie. It's just a solid color, but having different brush strokes kind of adds a fun technique to it, a fun look to it. Okay. White. I don't have any clean white on my plate, so I'm just gonna add a tiny bit of white. Making sure my brush is cleaned off. And I'm just going to go back to my dollop here, give it a little bit more shape, cover up any black that I might see. So there's our cute little dollop. I like it. Making sure the edges are clean and crisp. And then I'm going to also touch up my edges here on my slice, just with white, nice and slow. Turning your canvas if you need to have a little bit more control. Okay. Hold your pie out from your face so that you can see how it's looking. Always is a great way to see what needs to be fixed, changed, or to also just validate how good you're doing. I'm just going nice and slow right here on this edge. Just I feel like it needs to be a little sharper, but because I'm doing that, it's gonna show through. So I'll have to go back with another stroke of white to cover up that because it is a darker color. It's gonna take a couple layers to get it covered up. And then my last piece will be to just outline this outside edge of the plate one more time. It's just with white. Just cleans it up a bit, makes it look complete. And same with my top part up here too. All right, and there you have it. That is how to paint a pumpkin pie. How fun is that? Thank you guys so much for joining me. Please spread the news. Let people know that there are painting tutorials available, that they're a great way to do a party, even just have a little fun painting day with your family, that sort of thing. And be sure to follow me on social media for all the updates. I so appreciate the support. Thank you guys so much. Hope you enjoy this pumpkin pie painting, and we'll look forward to doing this again. And we'll see you next time.